Video Phantom! Scary stories!
Before we begin, please make sure you visit our Video Phantoms website every day and check out all of the new content and cool stuff we have for you over there. Also make sure you subscribe to the channel so you won't miss whenever we upload next. With that being said, let's grab your popcorn and enjoy the video.
You're watching our scary baboon story called The Ritual. Buckle up guys, it's finna be a wild ride as usual. Chapter 1. The Screams of the Night. The night was heavy with a palpable tension as the village of Ikondo slumbered beneath a moonless sky. Not a single star dared to pierce the veil of darkness that draped the jungle, and the only sounds were the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of a distant owl. Yet, beneath the blanket of quiet, a sense of dread hung in the air, as if the very forest was holding its breath. In a small hut at the edge of the village, an old man sat by the fire, his eyes fixed on the flames as they danced in the hearth. His face was etched with the lines of many years, each wrinkle a testament to the weight of his knowledge and the burden of his role. This was Obele, the village elder, and the keeper of the ancient rites that had protected his people for generations. Obele's hands trembled slightly as he reached for a wooden bowl filled with a thick, pungent paste. He dipped his fingers into the mixture and began to smear it across his forehead, muttering an incantation in the old tongue. The ritual had to be performed perfectly, for any mistake could mean disaster. The paste was made from sacred herbs gathered at the full moon, mixed with the blood of a goat sacrificed at the first light of dawn. It was said to ward off the spirits of the jungle, the unseen forces that lurked in the shadows, and most importantly, the creatures that Obele feared above all else, the baboons. The ritual was an ancient one, passed down from elder to elder, its origins lost in the mists of time. It was said that the baboons were not mere animals, but the spirits of the dead, the souls of those who had been denied rest, cursed to wander the earth in the form of these feral beasts. They were intelligent, cunning, and above all they were vengeful. Every year, on the night of the new moon, the baboons would descend upon the village, their howls echoing through the jungle like the wails of the damned. They would tear apart anything in their path, livestock, crops, even people, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. But for as long as anyone could remember, the ritual had kept them at bay. Until now. Obele felt a chill run down his spine as he completed the incantation. Something was different this year. The signs were subtle, but they were there. The strange behavior of the animals, the sudden sickness that had swept through the village, and the unnatural stillness of the jungle. It was as if the very earth was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. As Obele rose to his feet, he heard a noise outside the hut. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized what it was. The baboons had arrived early. He rushed to the door and threw it open, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The village was eerily silent, the only light coming from the flickering torches that lined the paths between the huts. But then, from the shadows, he saw them, dozens of pairs of glowing eyes reflecting the firelight like the embers of hell. The baboons were watching him. Obele's breath caught in his throat as he stared into the eyes of the creatures. They were larger than he remembered, their fur matted and stained with blood, their teeth bared in vicious snarls. But it was their eyes that terrified him the most. Those eyes, filled with a malevolent intelligence as if they were waiting for him to make a move. He slowly backed away, retreating into the safety of his hut, and barred the door behind him. The baboons did not follow, but their growls grew louder, more insistent, as if they were daring him to step outside. Obele knew he had to act quickly. He grabbed a bundle of dried herbs from a shelf and threw them into the fire, sending up a cloud of fragrant smoke. He began to chant, louder and faster, calling upon the spirits of the ancestors, begging for their protection. The flames leaped higher, casting eerie shadows on the walls, and the smoke thickened, filling the hut with a choking haze. But the growls outside only grew louder. Obele's voice faltered as he realized the truth. The ritual had failed. The protection it offered was no longer enough. The baboons had come for the village, and this time they would not be stopped. He fell to his knees, clutching the edge of the hearth as tears streamed down his face. He had failed his people. The ancestors had abandoned them. And now the village would pay the price. Outside, the growls rose to a deafening roar, and Obele knew that the time had come. He could no longer hide. With a final, desperate prayer, he threw open the door and stepped out into the night, ready to face whatever fate awaited him. But the baboons were gone. The village was silent once more, the torches still burning, the air thick with the smell of smoke. Obele looked around in confusion, his heart pounding in his chest. Had they left? Had the ritual worked after all? But then he saw it. A single baboon larger than any he had ever seen, standing in the center of the village. Its fur was black as night, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and its teeth bared in a terrifying grin. It was holding something in its hands, something small, limp, and bloodied. Obele's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it. The baboon was holding the body of a child. Chapter 2. The village's scream tore through the silence of the night, echoing off the surrounding jungle. The villagers, roused from their sleep by the elder's cry, rushed out of their huts, their faces pale with fear. They gathered around the elder, their eyes wide with terror as they saw what he saw. The massive baboon standing in their midst, holding the lifeless body of a child in its hands. The creature let out a low growl, its eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger, and tossed the child's body to the ground. The villagers recoiled in horror as the baboon took a step forward, its lips pulling back to reveal a row of sharp yellow teeth. It was as if the creature was daring them to challenge it, to try and stop what was about to happen. But no one moved. No one spoke. They were frozen in place, paralyzed by fear and the realization that the ritual had failed them. Obele, still on his knees, could only watch in horror as the baboon let out a deafening roar, a sound that reverberated through the village and sent a shiver down the spine of every living soul. And then, as if answering its call, the rest of the pack emerged from the shadows. Dozens of baboons, their eyes glowing with the same malevolent light, surrounded the villagers, cutting off any chance of escape. Their growls filled the air, a cacophony of rage and bloodlust that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. The villagers huddled together, their eyes darting around in panic as the baboons closed in. Some tried to pray, others whispered desperate pleas for mercy, but deep down they all knew there would be no salvation. The creatures were not here for mercy, they were here for blood. The first attack came without warning. A young man, barely more than a boy, tried to break free from the group, his feet pounding against the hard earth as he sprinted toward the safety of the jungle. But he didn't make it more than a few steps before a baboon lunged at him, its claws sinking into his back and dragging him to the ground. His scream was cut short as the creature tore out his throat, blood spraying across the dirt in a gruesome arc. The villagers screamed in unison, their fear turning to blind panic as they tried to flee in every direction. But the baboons were everywhere, their claws and teeth slashing through flesh, their howls of triumph mixing with the agonized cries of their victims. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the metallic taste of fear, and the village was quickly being transformed into a slaughterhouse. Obele could only watch, his heart breaking as the people he had sworn to protect were torn apart before his eyes. The baboons were relentless, their attacks precise and merciless, as if they had been planning this for years. And in the center of it all stood the massive black baboon, watching the carnage with a twisted grin on its face. For a moment, Obele's gaze locked with the creatures, and in that instant he saw something that chilled him to the bone: recognition. The baboon knew who he was. It knew what he had tried to do, and it was punishing him for it. With a roar of rage, Obele scrambled to his feet, his hands clenching into fists as he charged at the creature. He didn't care about the consequences. He didn't care that he was unarmed, that he was no match for the beast. All he knew was that he had to do something, anything, to stop the slaughter. But before he could reach the creature, he was struck from the side by another baboon. The impact sent him sprawling to the ground, his head spinning as pain lanced through his side. He struggled to get up, but the baboon was on him in an instant, its claws digging into his flesh as it pinned him to the dirt. Obele struggled beneath the weight of the baboon, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he fought to free himself. The creature's claws were like daggers, tearing into his skin with each movement, and its breath was hot and foul against his face. But the elder's fear was overshadowed by a desperate fury. He could not die here, not while his people were being slaughtered. With a surge of strength, Obele twisted his body and managed to land a punch on the baboon's snout. The beast recoiled slightly, just enough for him to wriggle free. He scrambled to his feet, his vision blurred by pain and blood, but he couldn't afford to stop. Not now. He reached for a nearby stick, the closest thing to a weapon he could find, and brandished it at the baboon. The creature snarled, its eyes narrowing with malice, but it hesitated, sensing the resolve in the old man's stance. Obele took a step forward, swinging the stick wildly, forcing the baboon to back away. But even as he fought, Obele knew he was outnumbered and outmatched. The village was a scene of utter chaos, with baboons rampaging through the huts, tearing apart anything and anyone they could find. The screams of the dying echoed in his ears, a symphony of horror that seemed to drown out all rational thought. He couldn't save them. He could only survive. Obele turned and ran, his legs propelling him toward the center of the village where the black baboon stood. The massive creature watched him approach, its eyes gleaming with an eerie intelligence, as if it knew this was the moment of reckoning. The elder charged, his stick raised high, aiming for the creature's head. But the baboon was faster. With a fluid motion, it sidestepped Obele's attack and swiped at him with its claws. The blow caught him across the chest, sending him crashing to the ground with a cry of pain. Obele lay there, gasping for breath as the black baboon loomed over him. It growled, low and menacing as if savoring the moment. Obele could feel the life draining out of him, his strength fading with each passing second. But even as the darkness closed in, he refused to give up. He had to find a way to stop this, to save what little remained of his village. And then, as if in answer to his silent plea, a memory surfaced in his mind, a story his grandfather had told him long ago, about the first time the baboons had attacked the village. The story spoke of an ancient pact, a bond forged in blood between the ancestors and the spirits of the jungle. The ritual was meant to honor that pact, to keep the balance between man and beast. But there had been another part of the story, one that had always been dismissed as mere legend. A blood sacrifice. Obele's eyes widened as the realization struck him. The ritual had failed because the blood sacrifice had been incomplete. The goat's blood was not enough. The jungle demanded more human blood. It was the only way to appease the spirits, to restore the balance. The elder's heart raced as he understood what needed to be done. He had to complete the ritual, even if it meant sacrificing himself. It was the only chance they had. With a supreme effort, Obele forced himself to stand, ignoring the pain that racked his body. The black baboon watched him curiously, its head tilted to one side as if it was trying to understand what the old man was doing. Obele reached into his tunic and pulled out a small ceremonial knife, its blade stained with the blood of countless rituals. He held it up to the sky, whispering a final prayer to the ancestors, begging them for the strength to do what must be done. Then, with a swift, deliberate motion, he plunged the knife into his own chest. The pain was excruciating, a white-hot agony that spread through his entire body. Obele gasped, his vision swimming as blood poured from the wound, staining the earth at his feet. But he held on, focusing all his remaining strength on completing the ritual. He began to chant, his voice weak but steady, reciting the ancient words that had been passed down through the generations. The air around him seemed to shimmer, as if the very fabric of reality was bending to his will. The black baboon took a step back, its eyes widening in fear for the first time. Obele could feel the power of the ritual surging through him, an overwhelming force that threatened to tear him apart. But he pushed forward, chanting louder, faster, as the blood continued to flow from his chest. The ground beneath him began to tremble, and a low rumble echoed through the jungle, as if the spirits themselves were awakening. And then, as if in response to his sacrifice, the world around him exploded with light. Chapter 3, The Awakening. The blinding light erupted from the earth, shooting up into the sky like a pillar of fire. The entire village was bathed in its glow, the shadows of the baboons stretching out like twisted phantoms. The creatures recoiled, their howls of fury turning to shrieks of terror as they scrambled to escape the light. Obele could barely see, his vision fading as the last of his strength ebbed away. But he could feel the power of the ritual pulsing through him, a connection to the spirits that transcended the physical world. He was no longer just an elder. He was the conduit, the vessel through which the will of the ancestors was being made manifest. The black baboon let out a roar, a sound of pure, primal fear as it tried to flee. But the light was everywhere, surrounding it, trapping it within a circle of searing energy. The creature thrashed and clawed at the ground, but there was no escape. The light burned hotter, brighter, until it seemed to consume everything in its path. And then, with a final agonized screech, the black baboon collapsed to the ground. Its body convulsed, the fur smoldering and the flesh charring under the relentless heat. The other baboons, sensing their leader's demise, fled into the jungle, their howls fading into the distance as they vanished into the night. The light began to dim, its intensity waning as the ritual drew to a close. The earth stopped trembling and the air grew still once more. The village, once filled with the sounds of terror and death, was now eerily quiet, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. Obele staggered, the knife still embedded in his chest as he struggled to stay on his feet. The power that had coursed through him was gone, leaving him weak and disoriented. But as the light faded completely, he saw something that filled him with a bittersweet sense of peace. The black baboon was dead. Its body lay motionless on the ground, its once fierce eyes now dull and lifeless. The creature that had brought so much terror to his people was no more. The sacrifice had worked. The balance had been restored. But the cost had been great. Obele looked around at the village, his heart heavy with grief. The bodies of the fallen lay scattered across the ground, the survivors huddled together in shock and disbelief. They had been saved, but at what price? The village was in ruins, its people broken and bloodied. The ritual had worked, but it had not brought the peace Obele had hoped for. He could feel the life slipping away from him, the darkness closing in as his vision blurred. But he had no regrets. He had done what needed to be done. He had fulfilled his duty as the elder, as the protector of his people. And now he was ready to join the ancestors to rest at last. With a final, shuddering breath, Obele collapsed to the ground, the knife falling from his hand. The last thing he saw was the sky, clear and bright as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. And then there was nothing. Chapter 4. The Aftermath. The sun rose slowly over the village, casting long shadows across the blood-soaked earth. The survivors, those who had somehow managed to escape the slaughter, began to emerge from their hiding places. Their faces were drawn and pale, their eyes hollow with the weight of what they had witnessed. They gathered in the center of the village around the bodies of Obele and the black baboon. The elder's lifeless form lay crumpled on the ground, his chest still marked by the wound that had ended his life. Beside him, the baboon's charred corpse was a grim reminder of the terror that had descended upon them. The villagers stood in silence, their hearts heavy with sorrow and confusion. They had lost so much, family, friends, their homes, and yet they were alive. Obele's sacrifice had saved them, but the price had been steep. The village elder, the man who had guided and protected them for so many years, was gone. One by one they began to weep, their grief spilling out in a wave of sorrow that swept through the crowd. Some fell to their knees, praying for the souls of the dead, while others simply stared at the ground, too numb to even cry. The weight of their loss was unbearable, and yet they had no choice but to carry on. After what felt like hours, the chief of the village, a tall, stoic man named Amadi, stepped forward. He looked around at his people, his eyes filled with a deep sadness, but also with a resolve that came from years of leadership. "We will bury our dead," Amadi said, his voice steady but heavy with grief. "We will mourn our losses and we will rebuild. Obele has given us a chance to survive, and we must honor his sacrifice by living." The villagers nodded, their faces still etched with sorrow, but a new sense of determination began to take hold. They moved slowly, reverently, gathering the bodies of the fallen, laying them out with care. The children were carried with the tenderness of a mother's embrace, the warriors were handled with the respect they had earned in battle, and Obele was lifted with the reverence due to a leader and a savior. As the day wore on, the villagers dug graves just beyond the village's edge, in a clearing where the sun's light could reach the earth. They worked in silence, the only sounds the soft scraping of shovels against dirt and the quiet sobs of those who had lost loved ones. When the graves were ready, they lowered the bodies into the ground, each one wrapped in the finest cloth they had left. Prayers were offered, asking the ancestors to welcome the spirits of the fallen, to grant them peace in the afterlife. And when it was Obele's turn, the chief himself spoke the final words. Obele was more than an elder, Amadi said, his voice thick with emotion. He was our guide, our protector, our connection to the past. He gave his life so that we might live, so that our children might have a future. We will not forget his sacrifice, and we will carry his memory in our hearts for as long as this village stands. With that, they lowered Obele into his grave, covering him with earth, sealing him to the land he had loved and protected all his life. The villagers stood together, united in their grief, but also in their resolve to move forward. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, that the scars of this night would take time to heal, but they also knew they had been given a second chance and they would not waste it. Chapter 5. The Return of the Jungle. In the days that followed, the village began the slow, painful process of rebuilding. The huts that had been destroyed were repaired, new crops were planted, and the surviving livestock was tended to with care. The jungle, once so menacing, seemed almost peaceful in the aftermath of the attack, as if it too was mourning the loss of life. But the villagers knew better than to trust the quiet. They continued to perform the rituals more carefully than ever, and each night they would gather around the fire, telling stories of the ancestors of Obele, of the night the baboons came. The fear had not left them, but it had changed. It had become something they could live with, something they could use to remind them of the dangers that lurked beyond the village's borders. Amadi took on the role of village elder, though he often felt the weight of the position pressing down on him. He was not Obele. He lacked the old man's wisdom, his deep connection to the spirits, but he was determined to lead his people with the same strength and resolve. One evening, as the sun was setting, Amadi sat by the fire, his thoughts heavy with the events of the past few days. He stared into the flames, watching as they danced and flickered, the light casting long shadows across the ground. A rustling in the trees caught his attention, and he looked up, his heart quickening. The memory of the baboon attack was still fresh, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of fear at the sound. But what emerged from the jungle was not a baboon, was a man. He was old, older even than Obele had been, his body hunched with age, his skin dark and weathered like the bark of an ancient tree. He wore a simple robe, tattered and worn, and his eyes, though clouded with age, were sharp and piercing. The villagers gasped as the old man stepped into the light of the fire, their eyes wide with shock and disbelief. They whispered among themselves, wondering who this stranger was and what he wanted. Amadi rose to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for the spear that rested beside him. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice firm but respectful. The old man smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver down Amadi's spine. "I am Nyoka," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "the keeper of the ancient ways, the guardian of the jungle's secrets." The villagers fell silent, their eyes fixed on Nyoka as he spoke. They had heard stories of the jungle's guardians, the mystics who lived deep within the forest, far from the eyes of men. But they had never seen one, had never imagined they would. "I have come," Nyoka continued, "because the balance has been disturbed. The spirits are restless, the jungle uneasy. The blood sacrifice was made, but it was not the first, nor will it be the last. There are forces at work, forces that seek to undo the bond between man and nature, to tear apart the fabric of this world." Amadi felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his chest. "What must we do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nyoka looked at him, his eyes filled with a deep, ancient wisdom. "You must learn," he said. "You must understand the true nature of the jungle, the spirits that dwell within it, and the power they hold. The rituals are not enough. You must go deeper, become one with the land, with the life that flows through it. Only then will you be able to protect your people, to keep the darkness at bay." Amadi nodded slowly, his mind racing. He knew the task ahead would be difficult, that the path Nyoka spoke of was fraught with danger. But he also knew that he had no choice. The village had been given a second chance, and it was up to him to ensure that they survived, that they thrived in the face of the challenges to come. The old man turned and began to walk back into the jungle, his form disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. The villagers watched in silence, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that their struggle was far from over. But as they looked at one another, they also felt a sense of hope, a belief that they could face whatever lay ahead. They had survived the night the baboons came, had endured the terror and the loss, and they had emerged stronger for it. And so, with the memory of Obele's sacrifice burning brightly in their hearts, they prepared themselves for the trials to come, for the new rituals they would have to learn, for the deeper connection with the jungle that they would have to forge. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were ready to walk it together as a village, as a family. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the villagers gathered around the fire, their faces illuminated by its warm glow. They told stories of the past, of the ancestors, of the spirits that dwelled in the jungle. And as they spoke, they felt the presence of Obele among them, his spirit watching over them, guiding them as they took the first steps on the path that would lead them into the future. A future where they would face the darkness, not with fear, but with the strength of those who had come before, and the knowledge that they were never truly alone.
Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me to grow. And guys, if you really enjoyed the video, please give it a share on social media, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you guys be hanging out at the most. It really helps, and I appreciate it, guys. Also, my goal is to reach at least 1 million loyal subscribers over the next 5 years. Guys, I'm going to give it everything I got and go hard as I can. And hopefully it pays off for me, guys. And y'all going to be a big part of that. And as I grow, you guys will be rewarded for a lot of stuff for helping me participating. And as just a token of my appreciation, guys, the least I can do. Also, guys, make sure you go down in the video description and click the links. Visit all my websites. I put hella work into these websites, man. Getting them built up, jam-packed with content just for you guys. You know, we got videos. We got the hottest trending offers online. I'm talking about everything, guys. Everything from education, teaching you how to make $1,000 a day online. Like, man, guys, everything that you can think of is on there. So, guys, make sure you go over there, check it out. Click links, watch videos, do your thing, man. I really want you guys to enjoy. I worked hard on it, and I want you guys to really enjoy it, man. So, yeah. Also, guys, while you down there in the description, make sure you go and check out my other channels. I got links to all of them down below. I worked hard on these channels, guys. I worked hard on my websites. I worked hard on everything for you guys. Make sure you join my Facebook groups. I got Facebook groups set up for every channel that I got, guys. I'm trying to go global, man. You feel me? It's the family, man. This Rich Founders, man. I want y'all to be part of Rich Founders. Y'all part of the family, man. This a mafia, you feel me? Going worldwide with this shit. But anyway, man, love you guys. Y'all be blessed, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.